So today, if I'm a food brand, I have to get registered with FSSAI or I take a license.
What are some of the good things that you've seen changing in food brands across the country?
For example, there is a mandatory training requirement by FSSAI. It's called FOSTAC. So if you're a food company, you need to have one trained supervisor. The minute you get NABL or ISO 17025, your report is now valid across 160 countries globally.
See, are you seeing a lot of labels where the accuracy doesn't match what the brands are thinking? Or are you seeing that changing positively?
There are companies that will put labels without even testing. Whenever you're going out to eat where you can see your calories, eat where you can see the kitchen, because if you can see the kitchen, you know the hygiene that's being followed. And when you're bringing products home, learn to read the label, because over time, what you put into your body is what your body is going to give.
Welcome to the Coutinho Show, where we can learn to reimagine our lifestyle.
Ashwin, it's a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
Welcome to Reimagine Your Lifestyle. There's a reason why we call it this. Our show is not to kind of preach to people what's right, what's wrong. It's really to empower people to think and to use the information and knowledge from experts like yourself to make better decisions. Because today with social media and all the influencing happening, people's mindsets are pretty much formed and they kind of believe trends and fads. So all we want to do is empower people to think that, hey, this can be done differently. Oh, I didn't understand this. You know, people love to jump to conclusions today about everything. But I actually have a selfish agenda having you on the show today. And of course, I'm going to allow you to explain what you do. But basically, we're trying to help clean up the food chain in our country. Like today, if you ask me, what are the top 5 best proteins in the country, which are clean, ethically clean, label clean, everything, or the 5 best utensils, or the 5 best masalas, the 5 best hydroponic farms, the 5 best peanut butters, things that every household needs. And because this is the same question that my patients ask me every day. Okay, till now, during lockdown, we kind of formed a platform called UK Lifestyle, where we hired a team of food science technologists who brands would send their labels. We would go through labels, we would verify certification just based on reading and putting it in over there.
Nice.
Until we started to find that some brands will only send you the certificates of certain batches and not send you the rest. And that's when we realized that we need to go a level deeper. So I said, before we go a level deeper, because I believe that every Indian consumer has a right to great food, honest food, when they're paying money for it. I put up a post one day and I said, hey, listen, I want to understand more about labs, who's doing ethical work, how are some products able to get away with certifications, and then you test them and you find out they're completely wrong. And I don't know how many brands tagged you, Equinox, Ashwin from Equinox, and saying, hey, we go to this brand, we trust this brand. So I said, if we're going to try to clean up the food chain, we need to educate ourselves, and I want our audience to be educated. So why not get like Equinox, which everyone around the country is saying, we go to Equinox, we trust Equinox. I said, let me get you on my show so you can, educate us today and tell us, what's going wrong in our country. Also, what's going right, because there are great brands.
Absolutely.
And how can we ensure or even help upcoming brands to get their certification right? A lot of our patients who come to us, they're taking medicines, they're taking chemo, radiation, but they also need good food. And today we're stuck. If you ask me, what are the top 5 best magnesiums? I really don't know. I would love to believe what influencers say. I would love to believe what some of the founders say. But until I see the data, it's very difficult to trust a label today.
Correct.
And this is a problem around the world. So thank you for coming on our show today. And I must say, a lot of people look up to you, to the work that you're doing. So let's start off with an introduction. What got you into this space? Have you always been in this space? And what was the motivation or inspiration to get into this space? I would love to hear your story.
So when I was 18, somebody had asked me like, hey, what do you want to do with your life? And I had 2 very weird answers. My first weird answer was, I want to improve water, food and air quality in India.
Beautiful.
The reason is, anytime I saw anyone from outside India coming in, they never ate street food. They would only eat in 5 stars. They would not, they would only have bottled water. Even at home, they'd be like, oh, can I get a bottle instead of the... So I was like, yeah, this perception of, food in India, I don't think it's deserved, but maybe, I don't know. I mean, I'm 18, right? So I'm like, let me do something to improve this, right? So when I was 18, I'm like, I had this vision that, hey, this is something I want to do. And the second thing I had was, hey, I want to have 7 different ventures. That's a whole different ballgame, right? So I studied computer science in UT Austin. I did my MBA in marketing from there. I was the good son. I came back. I joined our family business, which was in water treatment.
Okay.
I worked there for 6 months, and I have a very unique last name, Bhadri. So no matter where I went, everyone would be like, "Oh, are you, connected to Mr. Satish Bhadri, who is my dad?" And when I say yes, they're like, "Oh," and they would go into some story about him, and what I went to talk about would just get lost, right? So I was like, I think it's time I do something for myself, right? So, and my dad had always taught me this concept of the sun and the moon. He's like, the sun will give out light, the moon only reflects light. Yeah. So I realized that, hey, if I continue in Aquatech, I'm never going to be the sun. I'll always be the moon, right? So I was like, hey, let me go start out. While I was at Aquatech, we used to send water samples across the country, and the level of service was pathetic. Samples would go, not come back for 3, 4 weeks. Results would be wrong. Samples would get mixed up. And I was like, I think I can do better than what's happening. So I started Equinox Labs by doing water. Within the first year, we only did water. In the second year, we got into food because I realized that was an important thing. By the third year, we got into air. And then every year, we've added another commodity and another, like pharma and so on and so forth. Now we do everything under the sun for testing. Right? Around 2011, FSSAI was born. That's when I realized the full potential of Equinox, right? So, by the way, in all fairness, when I started Equinox Labs, next year I started something else, and I started focusing on that because I didn't think at that point Equinox would become big. I thought it would be one of my ventures. I started doing something else, which also did well. A few years later, I landed up selling that. But FSSAI, when it came around, then I realized, hey, India is finally taking food and food safety seriously, right? That's when. So I've been associated with FSSAI for the last, since its inception, and for the last 7 years I've served as a national advisor, right? So the idea of Equinox has been that, hey, can we measure the quality of water, food, air, environment? Because if you want to improve something, it all starts by measuring where you are, where are you baseline, and then only then you can improve. So over the last, and by the way, yesterday was our 19th anniversary, and so we've, in the last 1 year, we've served over 85,000 customers. Every year for the last 5 or 6 years, we've been helping more than about 5,000 food startups get off the ground. In terms, we help them with right from nutrition labeling, shelf life, label validation, like what should go on your label, what shouldn't go on your label, and everything else that they need. So we actually have a community called Food Founders Ecosystem. It actually helps. We don't talk about our services over there. We only help food founders, especially first-time food founders, figure out what they need to do next, where they can get things from, and so on and so forth, right? The big challenge that FSSAI also faced was nobody knew about it, right? So there are 2 kinds of food companies that I see, actually 3 kinds. The first is they don't know what is right and they've broken the law because they didn't know it. 2, they knew what is right and they still broke the law. And the third, they know what is right and they will do whatever it takes to only launch it when it's right, right? Unfortunately, we land up working with all 3 because when somebody comes to us, we don't know who they are. We pride ourselves in educating as much as we can. So we always convert the first category, we always convert to the third. Like somebody who doesn't know the law, we will educate you about the law and we'll be like, hey, you all need to do all this. So we educate more people than FSSAI themselves do. And all this education is free webinars, free everything, right? But the second category, even though we educate them and if they decide to break the law, there's nothing we can do about it, right? So the gap that we were trying to solve is, first was educate at least the industry on what the rules and regulations were. And then 2, where possible, provide them services in a very affordable format, and provide them pan-India so that wherever they are able to be compliant, they're able to work with somebody good, somebody knowledgeable. So that's been a little bit about me and Equinox.
Wow, that's amazing. So, when we look at these brands today, and there are a lot of companies upcoming where that's, doing a third-party check and coming and saying that there's no label accuracy, the label is claiming this, but as per our third party, it isn't. All these little companies are coming up. A lot of these products still have a lot of ingredients which may not be the best. They fall within regulations of FSSAI, but around the world, people are trying to cut down sugar, cut down fat, look at foods that have more fiber, more real ingredients and stuff. So you're still left with a whole amount of products which are questionable. The certifications may be right. Are there loopholes right now? How are brands escaping this? They're getting a test. Like, I'm going to ask you an upfront question. Okay. Can people go to small labs and kind of just bribe their way through, get certifications which are false? Because we're finding this happening.
Now, I'll tell you something even more surprising. There are companies that will put labels without even testing. So we've seen a bunch of those as well, right?
Okay.
Now much lesser, but back in the day, literally the guy, I mean, somebody's come to me and saying, "Oh, why are you doing all this testing? Why is it needed?" I'm like, because you need to put a label on your product. I'm like, "What's your product?" He's like, "Oh, I do ketchup."
Yeah.
I said, "Okay." So I said, "You have a label?" He's like, "Yeah, I put a label." I said, "Okay." So where the information come from? "Oh, my neighbor, he also does ketchup. He did testing from somewhere." I just same thing, right? Like, no, you have different recipes, you have different things, right?
It sounds like people copying diet plans.
Right? So same thing. People have gone online, just seen like, "Oh, Heinz has that. We'll just put Heinz. This brand has that. We'll just put." We are doing the same product. How is it different? But this comes from I don't know if they're in category 1 or 2. One is they just didn't know that, hey, you're supposed to get it tested for your specific product, or 2, they know it but they're like, hey, we're not going to spend the money.
Yeah.
Right. What has also happened over the last few years is this testing has become more affordable because of volume, because of changes in technology. It has become more affordable, right? So today, the big difference between, let's say, 10, 12 years ago and today is today, and people who are starting out want to be compliant. They want to be compliant, right? They can afford to be compliant. The only gap is they don't know what to do. That's the gap that we and many people in our field, will fulfill by letting you know that, hey, here is the regulations, here's what you need to do. It is very rare that somebody today will break the law on purpose. That being said, greed is still a very, it's a part of people's nature.
Trait,
so it's a greed is still a big trait. So there will be a handful who will do something illegal.
Yeah.
What happens with FSSAI is FSSAI has been tasked with a very, very Herculean task of managing food in a country like India, the size of India, the population, the lack of resources that FSSAI has. So today, if I'm a food brand, I have to get registered with FSSAI, or I take a license depending on my first year's turnover. So if I'm less than 12 lakhs, registration, which is 100 rupees, which is meant for petty vendors. Or if you're a normal food company that would easily do more than 12 lakhs, you take a license. FSSAI will issue a license, but post that, the checks and balances are very few. When you're supposed to be issued a license, a food officer is supposed to come to your facility and check. The number of facilities opening up and the officers do not match.
Yeah.
So most licenses are issued without anyone checking. That's problem number 1. Problem number 2, I'm issuing a license as a manufacturer. Let's say I'm FSSAI. Today, if you're manufacturing protein bars or you're making peanut powder, I just know the category. I don't know your SKUs, right? And third, let's say you're managing 10 different SKUs, 10 different products with one SKU each, right? I don't know what you're putting in them.
Yeah.
The assumption is, hey, here is the regulation. You're supposed to put ingredients in descending order in your regulation. But who's checking? FSA is not checking. They don't have the bandwidth to check, right? The solution is simple. This whole thing needs to be outsourced. Because FSI doesn't have the bandwidth. Like the way when Aadhaar card was rolled out, it was outsourced. If government tried to do the whole thing, it wouldn't have happened. It was outsourced to a company that knows how to do it at scale. Right? This whole thing needs to be outsourced. So imagine you're starting a company, you have 10 products and you're asked to pay 2,000 rupees, 200 rupees per product.
Yeah.
But then there's somebody checking your report, somebody's checking your label, making sure that it makes sense. What is in the report is in your label. If you are a food company and you have 10 products and you are asked to pay 2,000, would it be a blatant disregard for financials? No, it is affordable. If you're starting a food company, you should be able to spend a couple of thousand rupees. You've spent maybe tens of thousands on testing, but you should be able to spend a little bit more money with the government on getting your label registered, getting your product registered. So this is a suggestion I've given FSSAI already. That if you want to control and improve food safety, you need to be able to trace down products.
Right.
Today, this only happens when there is a complaint. So FSSAI's complaint handling mechanism is very good. Because if you complain to FSSAI, either on the portal, Twitter, wherever, they register it in the system and then they have that ticket has to be closed. So somebody will then look into it. So if nobody is complained about your brand, you can go away scot-free for years.
Yeah.
Right? The other side of this is the consumer is now becoming more aware. So consumer is now going to hold a mirror to the brand saying, hey, what are you saying? This is not making sense. How can this be fat-free? How can this have such a long shelf life? So consumers are now asking questions because now consumer is now more educated. Right? And the last pillar of here, if you want to improve this, it's people like you who are bringing this to the forefront, right? Because through you, today tens and thousands and millions of people are getting educated when you put out content like this. Now they're like, oh, one sec. Oh, this can't be here. Like, let's say we talk about label, we talk about a fat-free claim. Hey, but why are they saying fat-free? I can see some fat here. Hey, these ingredients, of course, these ingredients have fat, right? So as people get more educated, brands will themselves have to start getting compliant because now it's going to start affecting their business. So even if the law doesn't step in, the economics will.
Got it. Thanks for explaining that. See, I have a very simple vision, and that's why we're also doing this show today, because to take this vision forward, you know, I mean, we have a team of 160 plus nutritionists, doctors, and our biggest issue is patients are asking us, look, what do we eat? From where do we get? And when I was like, in my own household, do I know what I'm eating today? Because, you know, you see all of this happening. So technically, we want to leave every household in this country with what are the basics that we need from our cooking oils. I want the top 5 brands. There could be 10, 15, 20, but I want to start by giving the Indian population the top 5. Select which one you want. I want to do protein powders. I want to do the top supplements like a magnesium and omega, zinc, things that doctors are recommending, people are taking. I want to do from utensils to really check. I heard in a lot of stainless steel, there's nickel added to it today. And that can be pretty toxic. Then from our masalas, you know, things that we use every day. Peanuts to see what amount of mold we have. Like there are peanut butter brands where kids are eating it. And today we're actually stopping peanut butter like we do for gluten. We sometimes stop gluten for asthma patients because we're doubting that there's mold in that. And most of the samples will end up having mold. Most of them. Okay, then of course, you know, so it's like that. That's our vision right now. Every household, everyone should know that, hey, these are the top 5. Let me buy which one I want. There's no influencer involved. There's no endorsement involved. It's clear honesty. Now, after that 5, maybe the next 5 will come. Hey, we want to also be over here. And 10. But only the brands which are the cleanest with labels, which are doing this testing at a level that you're talking about. And every one of those brands, I want the founder on my show.
Nice.
I want to ask the founder, will your child eat this? Well, you know, I've met so many owners of companies where, I don't know, my family flies in vitamins from the US. We don't take our own. I'm talking about nutraceutical companies.
Wow.
They won't have their own stuff. If you're not having it, why are you selling it to other people? Exactly. So I want founders on the show talking about that, taking a pledge towards honesty of their brand, because then you disrupt a market. I mean, I'm not against influencers. It's great business. They can make money, but they're paid to tell you what the brand is telling them. Right?
True.
It's a different story when the founders lead from the front. Now you have influencers to take your business. In fact, influencers most of them will feel better because they know they're influencing an honest product instead of a dishonest product.
Correct.
No, so that's great. You know, coming more into certification, what's going well in the country right now? I don't want to just talk about the negatives. Like, how are you seeing that this food labeling, the kind of work you all are doing, are actually helping people come out there? I love the fact that you're doing free education because that's a big one. Most people are confused about the laws and the regulations that change. What are some of the good things that you've seen changing in food brands across the country?
So over the last 5 years, every brand that has come to us has come with a mindset saying, hey, can you let me know what needs to be done? I will do whatever it takes, which is fantastic.
That's beautiful.
Right?
Yeah.
2, when they've seen reports that are not aligning with their vision, they'll go back and change the product. Till 5 years ago, it would be like, oh, your report has too much fat. Can you give me a report with lower fat? We would say no. No, you're a bad lab. Okay, sorry, thanks, man. You can take your money back and get lost, right? Today, that doesn't happen as often. You'll still have once in a month, somebody will be like, hey, can I get a better report? I'm like, so sorry. That's not the kind of lab we are. There are other labs. I can point you to them also. It's just that at Equinox, that's not what you want to get, right? So today, founders are... they want to do the right thing, which is great. Now that may come from 2 places. One, that the founder themselves are, improved and they're like, hey, we want to, do the right thing. 2, they would have figured out that, hey, if you do the wrong thing, the risk to our brand is too high and we can tomorrow get shut down, right? Consumers are getting a lot more aware. FSSAI is now slowly and steadily starting to show its teeth, right? Which is good.
I see that happening,
right? So, because now there's a little bit of fear. Earlier, FSSAI was, many people used to just take it for granted. Like, I've done so many seminars with so many restaurateurs and hoteliers and all. When I have to tell them, like, hey, these are all the regulations, they're like, yeah, all this is great, but we'll do what we've been doing because we'll figure out when the guy comes, we will see. You know, chalta hai, dekhenge, that kind of attitude. That is slowly changing, right? A lot of the second generations who are taking over now, they are not comfortable with this. Let's manage this and chalega, and they want to do the right thing. So those are a couple of changes. FSSAI is a young law. That means it changes often, which can be a bad thing because suddenly the rate of change is too high. Like, you did some compliance with 6 months ago. Now you look at it like, one second, I need to change my packaging now. Or suddenly the non-veg logo changed. Right? Or suddenly there's a new requirement to call this out. But that works the favor of the consumer because FSSAI is improving pretty fast. For example, now very soon, within the next 6 months, you will have front of packaging that ABCD
Yeah.
thing that's coming up on high fat, high sugar, right? So which is going to be
Yeah.
fantastic.
No,
right?
FSSAI reached out to us. They told us about what's happening and they wanted our help too. I think like you rightly said, there is change. I see it happening.
So
Yeah.
the good part is FSSAI as a body is very open.
Nice.
Since it's a young law, it is still malleable. You can still make changes. You and I as individuals can still go to FSSAI and be like, hey, I would like this change. As citizen of the country, I would like to see this change. And if you come from a position of knowledge, which both of us do in this space, they will actually listen to what we're saying because we know what we're talking about. It literally falls on people like shoulders like ours to make these changes happen.
Yeah.
Right? If a common man just goes up to FSSAI, they're not going to be like, who the hell are you? But since we've been in the space for so long, they'll actually listen to us. There's so many committees where you can volunteer, where you can actually share your knowledge in a more formal manner and make these changes happen, right? So anytime I meet somebody who I know comes from a space where they're knowledgeable about food or health, I always try and see how I can get them into a committee in FSSAI, because now it's a lot more formal. See, them sending an email or having a call or a Zoom call versus, hey, you may have to fly down Delhi, maybe spend half a day, but you've just changed the trajectory of nutrition in the country, like how nutrition is perceived. It's worth the effort. Like before the pandemic, I used to spend 7-10 days in Delhi on my own time, because through Equinox, we could affect, let's say, 10, 20, 100 million people. But through FSSAI, I can affect 1 billion people.
Yeah.
Right? I used to volunteer that time because I know the changes we could bring. So today, there's so many new changes which have already come in. For example, there is a mandatory training requirement by FSSAI. It's called FOSTAC. So if you're a food company, you need to have one trained supervisor, which is who's been trained under FOSTAC. Now, in the last 6-7 years, more than 20 lakh food supervisors have been trained under this program. And the way it has been structured, it's a public-private partnership. So FSSAI has created the framework. I'm one of the people who created the framework for FSSAI. I'm the one who actually opened it up as a public-private partnership, because if FSSAI tried doing this, they wouldn't be able to have the reach. Right. I said, hey, you need to have localized training partners who can mobilize this, go educate the end customer, get them to sign up for the program, get them trained for a day. So that WHO may be appreciating that in a more formal way, that it's one of the most successful public-private partnerships that a government has done for something like this, right? They've introduced hygiene rating, they've introduced Eat Right India. So there are a lot of campaigns which are happening through the country, which is educating people, right? So these are a few changes which are coming up.
That's amazing. I have to resonate with you. We've been reaching out to the FSSAI over the last couple of weeks, and we've got tremendous support from them. Tremendous support. You know, you always have that fear before you reach out to a government body. Are they even going to reply? But the FSSAI has been very, and we see it happening around news. Like you said, they're showing their teeth right now, which is a brilliant thing. So I have to resonate. We see that change happening, and I'm happy that you're part of that as well. So I wanted to talk about when it comes to batch tests. Okay, I know that is a genuine problem because raw materials can also change. So how are companies safeguarding this? Like the same, let's say a brand is producing Kapli wheat, or another brand is producing protein powder, not producing, getting it in from a different country. Each batch could be different. Like we know A2 whey protein, every batch can be different, which is why usually the manufacturer says the taste could be different, the color could be different, but every batch is not being tested, right? So how do you control this? Is it that they have to follow the main regulations which are drawn first to ensure that batches are, or is there a certain regulation where out of every 10 batches, one has to be checked?
So funny enough, the regulation doesn't talk about batch testing, which is very interesting, right? Another very funny thing is there are a lot of regulations on different kinds of products. There is no regulation on cooked food, which is a whole different ballgame, right? But we'll come to that later. So there are two kinds of companies. One are your large MNCs, right? What large MNCs do is they get every batch tested because it's too much at stake. Even if it costs whatever it costs, they will get it tested. They will quarantine the product for 6-7 days, let the report come, then the product is released. That is one kind of large company. Second kind of large company, when the shelf life is a little shorter, they're like, hey, we can't wait for the test report to come. So we will release it because by the time the product really reaches the consumer, it's 7-10 days anyways.
Yeah.
From distribution, from the manufacturer to distributor, sub-distributors, until it actually gets to retail, it takes about 7-10 days. So they release the product. If the report fails, they will call for it back because the chance of a report failing in a very systematic this thing is very low, right? Then comes your normal, smaller manufacturers. Now they can't afford testing because they do smaller batches. See, when a large company does a batch, it would be a 5-10 ton batch. In a 10-ton batch, spending $5,000-10,000, it's not a big whoop. But you're creating a 5 lakh rupee batch or a 3 lakh rupee batch or a 1 lakh rupee batch. Now spending 5,000 rupees suddenly eats into your bottom line, right? So I understand that. See, I understand how economics work, right? So as long as your process is steady, and if your person who's giving you the raw material is getting his product tested, because when somebody, let's say I'm giving you raw material, which you're turning into something, you're making peanut powder or peanut butter, I'm giving you peanuts. But I'm not only giving you peanuts, I'm giving peanuts to everybody. Now you can ask me, like, hey, whenever you're supplying me peanuts once a month, can that batch be tested? Or your batch, master batch for that month be tested? So this is another way, a very smart way of creating traceability. Because tomorrow if something goes wrong in your final product, it's your name on the line. You can't blame the supplier unless you have some traceability from the supplier, right? If now a batch is bad, you can just reject it. The only challenge comes in which manufacturer of yours is going to give you a report, a failed report, and say, oh, here's the batch and here's a failed report. It's not going to happen, right? This is where what you touched upon earlier, that, hey, every batch is not tested, everything is, they'll only get batches for, reports for some, not for others. Now, this is exactly where somebody like FSSAI has to come in and do randomized testing. I know FSSAI has the budgets to do it. I just don't know if that data is as public as it should be. There should be that data should be a lot more public. What all has been tested, which brands were tested. Now, a big exercise which you're trying to do, FSSAI has tested all these brands at some point.
Exactly.
They
I trust them, but what's happening in between?
Correct. Now, where those reports haven't been released, it's not been combined into a consumable, easily consumable format. Where they've gotten it tested from again is a question mark, right? So, somebody like you, when you come in and say, hey, I want to test 20 of each and figure out the top 5. Now, that kind of a service, because what you're doing is actually called service to humanity. This is not for your clients. This is, I'm assuming it's going to be a public list for everyone to kind of see and be like, hey, well, these are, and I think it will become an aspiration for people to be on your list. Right? Because once it becomes public, people, and obviously brands who make that cut, they will see better sales, they will see better things, which will become an aspiration for other brands to be cleaner.
Lead by example. That's what I
So another new trend is your whole clean label thing. So consumers are now starting to realize that if my product has ingredients that I can't pronounce, or if my consumer can't pronounce, they understand that now. Slowly and steadily, right? I got a very weird request a couple of years ago. Schools wanted to come and have me come and speak to kids, like 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th graders about nutrition label. How do you need nutrition label? So I was like, what? Like, why? They're like, no, we want them to understand from that age. And the best one was when I spoke at my own kids' school. It was amazing for me to see my kids in the audience and them asking questions. But that level of education is what is going to end up changing the world into what we're looking at.
That's beautiful. When I was in the US, we used to run a program with Yale, and I think it was Michelle Obama's initiative at that point. It was called Nutrition Detectives. It was a mandatory program across the US, all schools, private and public. Just a simple PPT put very graphically that taught children how to read labels. And I thought that was such a beautiful part. We brought that down to India, but that's many years ago. Now labels have also changed and stuff like that. I would love to figure out how we can create an online thing that can move, even if schools don't do it. We'll get it into parents and kids and stuff like that. I would love to do that with you as well.
So I think that also turned into multilingual is what will make the cut.
We can do that. We can change it into languages. So I would love to do that.
Right. So I think that's something we can definitely collaborate on. I know because there's no commercial gains from any of those.
We don't want to make money.
But the impact on the next generation is going to be mind-boggling.
Absolutely. Great. So, there are international labs. A lot of brands put European lab tested. And then we have, of course, our local Indian brands. What's the difference between these? Testing labs,
lot of the difference will be in the testing methods. However, India has a body called NABL, National Accredited Board of Laboratories, that will accredit any lab. So any lab, if after they cross a year or two, they will normally want to go for NABL accreditation because it gives them some legitimacy of what they're doing, right? The beauty is NABL accreditates you for a standard called IS 17025, which is an international standard. So when they say European lab, American lab, anywhere, since everyone's testing methods are slightly different, The minute you get NABL or ISO 17025, your report is now valid across 160 countries globally. Because otherwise, how do you do international trade? Like every batch will have to be tested in every country, which doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
So as long as you've tested your product from an NABL in India or ISO 17025 certified laboratory, that means the methods that they're using are solid. NABL accreditation is actually at a parameter levels for a specific type of food. Means if I take protein in protein powder and if I want protein in biscuit, these are two different categories and I have to get certified on each category.
Got it.
Right?
Yeah.
So for example, the last time I looked at our scope, it was 880 pages long.
Wow.
Because it's the same, like let's say it's only 10 or 20, but it will be across 40 different categories. So it will become like 50 pages or 100 pages right there, just for those items. The beauty of NABL is they go down to that level. See, like something like ISO 9000 is for an organization. It's a very broad thing, like, oh, you have processes in place.
Yeah.
NABL is like, no, you're NABL accredited for those parameters. So if I do a test for you, which is not under NABL, I cannot use the NABL symbol.
All right.
I cannot give you, there's something called ULR, which is a traceability thing. I can't give you that, right? So I have to have a second report, which is non-NABL or which can't carry that. So that is one way of checking whether the lab you're working with is accredited or not.
Got it.
There's another accreditation in India by FSSAI, which FSSAI will go and notify your laboratory. They will approve your laboratory because when FSSAI outsources, because they do outsource, they will only give it to FSSAI notified labs.
Yeah.
Right. So even the regulation says that any testing you do should be with an NABL accredited or FSSAI notified laboratory. So today, I don't think our accreditations are anything lesser or our accuracy of our methods any lesser than that of Europe or US.
Yeah. So this enables you all on the same platform.
Absolutely.
Now, are there labs in our country that don't have these certifications?
Yes.
Yeah. So it's very interesting. Yesterday we had Mr. Dhruv, who heads Orange Health.
Oh, nice.
We brought a lab because
Nice.
our biggest issue with food was also discrepancies in lab reports. We have to send our patients to 3 different labs to understand which report is finally correct. And he spoke about NABL as well.
Nice.
And he spoke about out of most labs, most don't have it. And most have it. And this is the education we're trying to bring to people. Now, I would look for an NABL for sure. You know, I wouldn't look at any lab that doesn't have an NABL if it's quality that is important to me.
Absolutely.
So that's a great point. I wanted to just go back to the batches that you spoke about. So, you know, a lot of brands in India, like protein powders, were found that they were using, you know, the spurious protein. So, which means they were getting spurious protein, which they were probably aware of, and using the same thing to generate products and stuff like that. So, I see the third-party testing or blind testing being one of the most efficient ways to actually break these kind of brands down, right? What about labels? Like you rightly, you know, you said people slap on labels and stuff like that, and the accuracy. Are you seeing a lot of labels where the accuracy doesn't match what the brands are thinking? Are you seeing that changing positively now?
Slowly and steadily, labels are becoming more and more accurate.
Accurate now,
Right.
that's good.
That doesn't mean that all labels are accurate.
Yeah.
So I think one thing that once FSSAI enables that every product that you have has to get registered with FSSAI and you have to upload the report for it along with the label, I think overnight this whole discrepancy will go away.
Wow, what a simple fix.
It's a very simple fix. They're just taking their own time to get there, right? It can be tech enabled. So I'm a techie.
Yeah.
I discussed this with my tech team. I said, hey, how long will it take us to create the system? And I kid you not, my team said less than 2 weeks. And we can even use AI for label reading automation and a bunch of other stuff. But even if you forget all that, if you just keep it in super manual, it's less than 2 weeks of tech work to get the system up and running, right? Because you have to just store it. There'll be somebody with authority who will check this once. This is your product label. This is what the lab has given.
Yeah.
Is it matching? Yes. Is it making sense? Are your ingredients in the order you're supposed to? Right. Now, the biggest challenge comes at what you're claiming as ingredients and what you're actually adding.
Yeah.
There's nobody checking that either.
Yeah.
So there's some level of trust you have to have in that brand.
Correct.
Because of which today there are certain brands that have become bigger because of the trust factor. They may not have more funding. They may not have large facilities or whatever. And funny enough, founder-led brands normally will not cheat because it's the founder's face.
Correct.
That's how the founder will at least knowingly not, break the regulation because literally his face and his personal reputation which is at stake.
Yeah. No, that's good to know. I want to come into nutraceuticals now. Okay, many nutraceutical companies, you can sell the products in India, but you can't sell it in different places. Is this because they don't have the European lab tested? Like, let's say I start a nutraceutical company and I'm selling in India. Now I want to sell it in Europe. I want to sell it in the US. If I had got my certifications done at the highest level, then automatically my products will be able to be sold.
So certification, testing, ingredients, all these three things matter, right? So if you're a nutraceutical company or even a food company who wants to export, having accreditations and certifications help. So the most basic certification you can get is HACCP, right? Which is one of the easier ones to get. Then above HACCP, you have something called ISO 22000.
Okay.
And above ISO 22000, you have something called FSSAI 20000. So these are typically the three certifications you have, and beyond that, there are a lot more. But these are the basic three ones which are affordable in India. So if you're looking to export, these three certifications where you would start. Point number 2 is you have to see whether the ingredients which you're using, are they banned in the country you're you're planning to send it to. Right now, there's a whole uproar about Nestle and the sugar in baby food. Now, I'll tell you, funny enough, I'm actually going to take Nestle's side here.
Okay.
Right? I'll tell you why. India didn't have a regulation on low sugar. Right? US did. Europe did. So, they were overnight forced to change those powders. Right? It is not a secret that the product that is sold in Europe and US and other countries is different because they will tweak it to the local taste. In India, it is lower than where it is in some other places. And their pledge was anyways to go low. So even if nobody stepped in, they would have in the maybe 3 or 5 years gone to zero because a company that way can't switch their product overnight. Right? If the regulation didn't ask for it, so they didn't do anything wrong. If you ask me, Nestle didn't do anything wrong. They're like, hey, one sec, in India there's no regulation.
This country is
in other countries we are doing 12, India we're doing 7.
Yeah.
Okay, hey, in the next 5 years we make it 0. So they didn't do anything wrong. Now, if as a country we want to go to 0, then all you have to do is make a regulation. The beauty of regulations is it does give people time. So regulation doesn't mean that this has to start from tomorrow. You have to give people time, 6 months, 1 year, and that's typically what FSSAI would do. Anytime there's a change coming up that requires a little bit of runway to get done. For example, they suddenly ask you to have this, let's say, front of label is now going to come, right? Front of package labeling is going to come. They can't say start it tomorrow. They say that it's effective from tomorrow, but brands now have 6 months to 12 months to comply. Now, if you have paper stock worth 2 years, they may allow stickering for some time.
Understood.
And say, okay, but after a year, there's no sticker allowed, nothing allowed.
It's on your new.
It needs to be new, right? So I think those are the kind of changes that we are seeing that will definitely bridge the gap.
Okay. Do you think there can be more stringent laws when it comes to nutraceuticals, considering that marketing has become so good, people without a problem want to take a nutraceutical? Do you think India as a country can be more stringent on the quality? Because there's some really third-class nutraceuticals in our country, and you can make out just with the price point.
Correct.
I mean, how do you even get the main ingredient at that price point? Unless the company's putting a lot of their money, they're burning a lot of money and stuff. So what are your thoughts on this?
So I think nutraceutical wise, our regulations are the regulations are strong.
Yeah.
I don't think the enforcement is.
Enforcement is,
right?
Yeah.
Because as a regulator, I can say, hey, this is a standard you need to maintain.
Yeah.
But if I'm not coming and checking if you're maintaining that standard, I'll say, oh, you have to have 0 heavy metals.
Yeah.
Right? You can't add mercury to Ayurvedic medicine, example.
Yeah.
But if I'm not checking if you're adding mercury to Ayurvedic medicine, then
how do I? Yeah.
So the gap can be easily solved using very basic regulation and basic technology. What I mean by that is if FSSAI comes down to product level mapping. So if you're a manufacturer, here are your 5 products. Every 6 months, you're supposed to be submitting a quality report to FSSAI, which they have enabled through a portal. I don't think it's being mandated and I don't think it's being followed up to the T.
Got it.
I'm a big proposer of pushing something like this outside, that they can contract a company like a TCS or anyone. Hell, they can contract Equinox if they have to, right? Because we have the bandwidth to be able to pull this off. Or go to a bigger company like a TCS, whoever, who can monitor this for them. Because I understand, since I've worked very closely with FSSAI for a long period of time, I know the restrictions they have. They suddenly can't hire 500 people and say, start checking this. They don't have the bandwidth, they don't have the mechanism, they may not have the budget. Outsource it. Now, if it's being outsourced, you can charge.
Yeah.
Right? You don't have to be this 100 rupee registration thing. And yes, a person who's doing a 100 rupee registration, a roadside vendor, may not have as many checks and balances, which is fine. But other people, bigger ones, they can. Right? But once FSSAI starts, is give people a year's time to comply. And I think the industry will comply. See, any regulation that FSSAI has brought in, over time, people have started to see the importance of it. So whenever new regulation comes, for the first few days, the industry is like, oh my God, one more cost, one more thing.
Yeah.
But then they realize that, hey, once if I do this, it'll actually make my product safer. If I'm able to claim this, now I can attract more business, right?
Yeah.
So I publicly speak a lot on food and food safety. I'm like, the unique skill of any good quality manager or anyone in quality, and I work very closely with quality, is if you can convince the founder that the money that has to be spent on quality becomes an investment rather than an expense. Because if you are saying, hey, you know what, if I'm able to do this quality and it helps you increase business, as a founder, you'll be happy to spend that money.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But you're like, oh, I have to do this report and the report's going to be in my table. You're like, oh crap, I'm just wasting ₹1,00,000 for nothing.
Yeah.
Or, but you can put this out on your website. Hey, put it out on social media. And if you're doing the tests, put it out.
Yeah.
Share it with customers. Share it on your label. Share it with who you're working, whatever. So I know so many companies who started putting our name on their product. I'm like, why are you putting our name? They're like, no, instead of just saying tested randomly, we want to call out
the lab as well.
We want to call out the lab. So which got me thinking, I think everyone should.
Yeah.
If regulation changes, today you have an FSSAI number, why not have your test number, or why not have that, hey, by the way, this company works with this lab.
And that kind of makes sense, because if an Equinox or other
Whoever,
labs,
of course.
whatever, has an NABL, I would want to know that. So the moment I see that, I know, okay, NABL, and I see your points. I think education is so important. You know, we've come up with this whole thing, be educated and not influenced. You know?
I love it.
Because I would buy a product looking at a report rather than an influencer telling me.
So
that's what I would do.
So I know a few companies who started doing that. They have started putting QR codes.
Yeah.
You scan the QR code and you can actually download the report.
The
like
report,
this.
see traceability.
See traceability, and you can see the same batch number.
I think that's amazing.
Now this is a very smart move. Only I think I've seen 2 brands pull this off.
Okay.
Because when they came to me, they were like, hey, we would like to test every batch. And I was like, are you serious? Because I know, I know the size of the company. I'm like, I don't think you can afford it. They're like, no, we're going to actually put out a QR code on our product.
Yeah.
And they can see the batch. And I was like, now you've cracked the, now we've cracked the code, right? So this is such a simple thing, but it can go such a long way.
Amazing. So what about fresh produce? Because that's the second biggest thing. You know, we're primarily vegetarians in the country. Even non-vegetarians eat vegetarians, but like, we need more green leafy vegetables. We need all of these things. Does your lab also test that? If we gave you a sample from a hydroponic farm claiming chemical free, all of that stuff, we can do that
absolutely.
as well, right?
So we can look for pesticides, heavy metals, all of that.
Lovely.
However, one piece of advice that I give everyone whenever we talk about fresh produce, when it comes home, no matter how nicely you produce it, today our transit, our storage, and your last mile transit and your last mile storage is something that is, leaves something left to be desired. So that needs to improve. The infra of veggie handling in our country needs a large upgrade, and probably will in the next 5-10 years. It will change drastically. However, today, no matter where you buy from, if the veggie comes home, wash it, sanitize it, and then use it.
Yeah.
So, for example, for the last 10 years, we've been ozonating all our veggies. It's a 5-10 minute process. You just start the machine, put it in. It doesn't take that long, right?
Yeah.
But all pesticides gone, everything outside gone dead. Then insects gone dead.
Yeah.
Because you never know what goes inside your body. Now, if you have vegetarian food and if it's not cooked, especially salads, that kill process, that kill step is critical. Because if you've not killed microorganisms, see, kill can come through chemical or through heat, right? Ozone is one of the best oxidizing agents in the world. What that means, it's 100 times more powerful than chlorine, 100 times, and it dissipates in no time. What that means is your veggies will not make you fall ill. Now, sometimes if there is something in your veggies, there's fungus, there's mold, there's insect, something that goes in to your body, it's going to cause harm.
Yeah, I absolutely believe in that. No, thanks for sharing that. So it's good to know that the lab can also test samples of like lettuce and berries and whatever and stuff like that. What about mold in our country? Because the weather's changing, humidity, something's growing somewhere else. Like you said, the food chain, by the time it reaches home, there's been mold found in jars of peanut butter, all of these things. So I understand this could be a genuine problem for manufacturers as well. Any tips on that? Like, I know mold has to be tested because we have so many people who are so sick. They go through all the scans, test nothing wrong, and then you find mold. And you just sort out mold, whether it's a leak, dampness in their wall, air conditioner, and food, and it sorts the problem out.
So we serve 2 kinds of people for this. One, manufacturers themselves, because when we do a normal microbial test, microbial panel as we call them, there is mold and yeast, both that get tested, right? So you'll typically check for all your pathogens, but even though mold and this thing are not They can't kill you, but they can make you pretty sick. Right? Mold unfortunately travels through spores. Now, what this means is you can have a small leak there, and I'm making something here. That spore can come and fall over here. Now I'm packaging it. Now by the time I open it, somewhere is mold. That is point number 1. 2, again, if there is my kill step and there's something, right? When it comes to your house, and now you open up a big jar of peanut butter. And every day I'm sitting at my living room and let's say eating, I'm taking a big scoop, and it takes me 30 days to finish. Now, again, in my own house, if I have a small mold patch somewhere, and that mold falls in my food, now 10 days later I will see mold over there. So a couple of things to be careful with. One, always use at a home level, always use clean spoons for everything. It could be pickles. I'm a huge fan of chili oils. Right. So again, anytime, like by mistake, once there's a tiny little drop, 2 days later, I had to throw my entire chili oil away because it's a mold, and my fault, right? I mean, like, I really saw it. I was like, I don't think anything will happen. No, it's only chili oil. Last couple of bites, mold came, right? So 1, use spoons which are completely dry. 2, use different spoons for different things. Don't transfer one thing to the other. 3, make sure you have no visible mold patches in your house. So the good thing about mold also is if it is around, you can see it. Unless it's inside your vents and all, which again, if it's steel vents or...
Is there a way to check for mold at home? Is there like a...
There is a test. So many households actually do contact us for air.
So you'll do that?
So we are India's largest air quality monitoring company.
Wow.
While 90% of our business comes from corporates, another 10% comes from homes.
So a household can call you. Because see, I'll tell you what, there are asthmatic babies today, young adults, and you do everything, but you got to check your environment finally. So you all do that as well. That's amazing.
And that is normally done quarterly because as your environment changes outside, it changes inside.
It's going to change inside.
So doing it once a year is kind of pointless. So if you're going to do it 4 times a year. Otherwise, once a year, and if it's clean, then okay, you may not have to repeat it again and again. But at least the first year, I would do it 4 times, and maybe next year reduce it once.
And especially if you know there are leaks and you have patches, there's bound to be mold.
Absolutely.
So that's a good
thing. So mold can be tested 2 ways. One is it's called an open plate method, where we can just, let's say I want to assess if there's mold here, we can keep an open plate, after 5 minutes cover it, get it tested. 2, there's a certain patch and you're not sure is there mold on it or not. We even do a swab and that can get tested as well. And it's extremely affordable.
That's amazing. No, that's a good to know as well. I mean, again, that's why I said this is about reimagining your lifestyle. I've learned so many new things from you today. The point on changing spoons just brings up my mom nagging me. I used to just take the same spoon and put it into everything and stuff, and she would be, it'll spoil faster. So no, that's great to know. So anything new in the field of testing, advanced testing that's coming up in your space, something that we could all know about?
So I think there are a lot of new machinery that's coming out, which is making things faster, more accurate, and somewhere even cheaper. While the machine is more expensive, the running cost is getting a little lower, which allows us to become more cost effective to customers. Right. So that is one thing. 2, there's a lot of new technology around PCR detection, where you're looking at things at a DNA level. So identification of species becomes easier. So that is a new thing in our field. But I think the best thing in our field is actually nothing to do with us, but to do with our customers. That awareness of I want to be compliant is there. That, like, you know, from inside they want to be compliant. People want to eat healthier, right? So I don't know if you're aware of a new regulation that came out, which says that if you have a restaurant and more than 10 outlets, you need to have a nutrition label, or at least the calorie count in menus. So many menus, you will start seeing a calorie count, right? But at this moment, it is you have to have 10 restaurants or more, or have a central license, but that's for bigger hotels like this. So now here, if you look at the menu, you're going to see a calorie count, right? So anywhere, but now very soon, the next year or 2, you're going to see that in smaller outlets, smaller chains.
We had asked FSSAI about that. They said logically it was not possible to reach the lower levels, but they plan to start doing that.
The idea is we've actually, so that is not tested value. That's a calculated value.
Just a calculated.
Because see, if you have to test it, now it becomes phenomenally expensive. So what we've done is we actually built out a tool called Nutripedia. A service, right? We started as a tool. Funny enough, nobody wanted to use the tool. They're like, just take our recipes and give us the value. Because we made a self-serve tool. Like, here's my tool. You enter everything. You upload an Excel file. You can download what you want. People are like, we don't do all that. We're happy to send it to you. So today we've processed 6-7 lakh recipes in the country. We've worked with companies like Swiggy and many others, where now this information is available on their portal, in their app.
So you just get a recipe and you give them back the calorie counts, proteins, fats, macros.
Absolutely. All the macros calculated, because we have a database of almost about 5,500 ingredients. We today have about 20 odd nutritionists who work with us. Who will, because see, again, everything is not only AI or only tech.
Yeah.
There is a
You
human
need a
element.
human element
So we
for-
call it AI square. It's like artificial intelligence plus actual intelligence, right? So that gives you
I
the
believe
outcome.
in that,
So
yeah.
which makes it very, very affordable and very fast.
Okay.
Because actual testing will take you 7-10 days.
Okay.
Will be expensive.
And it's giving you the macros. It's giving you all the macros.
So you can't do micros in that.
Yeah. So no fiber, just the carbs, protein, and fats. Which is
carbs,
great
protein,
stuff.
fat, sugar,
Fantastic
salt.
stuff. Beautiful.
So that is now making it affordable for even smaller brands to do. So the beauty is, the other day I was in Gurgaon in a small, like it's a one outlet thing, and I was talking to the founder, and I see this label. I'm like, hey, you don't actually, you don't need this. He's like, no, I wanted to do it. I'm like, why? He's like, no, I want my customers to know. And he's like, oh, I'm like, but didn't it cost you a lot of money?
Yeah.
He's like, no, I got it. I use this online thing called Nutrapedia. I didn't tell him where I'm from. I'm like, okay, which company does that? He's like, oh, Equinox.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, you didn't find any other better lab?
Yeah.
And he's like, no, it's very good. They did it. And it was so amazing to hear somebody else.
Yeah,
I was like, hey, by the way, at the end, I was like, by the way, I'm the founder. He's like, oh my God, you didn't tell me. He's like, I love your company. Wherever people don't recognize me, I definitely do this. I always, because that feedback, that unfiltered feedback is so helpful. Because sometimes you get real feedback like where we need to improve, and we of course improve. So smaller brands are doing it because they want to use it as a differentiator.
Understood. No, this is fantastic. Before we end, I want you to give a message to anyone out there. There could be budding food entrepreneurs, it could be the general audience, the public. What are some of the tips that you would give them to create a more honest, I mean, people are fed up. People want an honest food chain. We want to eat without having to think and worry and ask 10 people and go onto Instagram. And I mean, why should we need social media to tell us what to eat? We should be able to walk into a store, identify and brand. That's where I eventually wanted to come, or at least have the top 5-10 brands and other brands follow, because we're setting like a kind of a, no nasty kind of a thing. So what would your advice as a founder of a lab that's doing all of this day in, day out? You've seen loopholes, you've seen people finding, gaps in the law and all of that stuff. What would your advice be to people?
So to food founders, my advice is pretty simple. It is a lot cheaper and a lot better for your business if you comply with the law than not complying with your law. Two, if you actually do comply with the law, figure out how it can actually benefit you, because there is still time where, since everyone's not 100% compliant, if you're compliant and you show it off to your customers, it will benefit you, right? Two, for the general public, whenever you're going out to eat where you can see your calories, eat where you can see the kitchen, because if you can see the kitchen, you know the hygiene that's being followed. And when you're bringing products home, learn to read the label. Learn to see like fat content, learn to see sugars, because over time, what you put into your body is what your body is going to give. Right. Absolutely. So that becomes absolutely critical. So nutrition, and of course, I'm talking to that person, and I would love to pick your brain later on about what I should be eating. But finally, the nutrition that you have should only do good to your body. If it's taking away from it, then you're doing disservice to yourself.
No, thank you for that. I want to go back to another quick question. Okay, we reached out to Swiggy and Zomato openly because my biggest issue was not with the brands. Whenever you're to tear down brands, we want brands to cooperate. It's as simple as that. Zomato got back to us. Okay, my simple thing was, you order, let's say I'm going to order a butter chicken, or let's say a palak paneer. The order's got to reach me in a particular amount of time. It's cooked on high flame. Fair enough. Everyone's aware of this. Okay, the chef cooks the palak paneer, puts it into a plastic container, seals it with tape so it doesn't spill out. Probably takes 45 minutes, average order 1 hour to reach in Bombay. Let's take 1 hour. Okay, forget, let's take 30 minutes. By the time it reaches me, I may not immediately eat it. It's stored with, the steam in to keep it hot. I open it up. If I want to test a food sample right now and look at whether, I know it's food grade plastic, but the longer you keep it in, you know what I'm coming at.
Of course.
Can you do a test on this for me and give me a report? If I reach out, brilliant, because I'm going to reach out to you for that. I just need the public to know that what did we ask Swiggy and Zomato to do? Give people an option. I'll pay extra for better, not plastic. I'll pay extra. It's my choice. I understand there are people who are price sensitive. I'm not here to try to tell everyone, do this. You want to eat in plastic? That's your choice. But is there a better way? Because I want
$10 more, $20 more. Can I upgrade my containers?
Swiggy didn't reach back to us at all. They obviously don't care. I always believe people should at least acknowledge if they care. Zomato did.
I will champion your cause, because I know both the founders.
Fantastic. Please reach out to them.
Of course.
We're not here to tear them down. We just want better stuff for people. You're doing so well. Put an option. I'm not asking it for your bottom line to be eaten. If I want biodegradable, I'll pay extra.
So I think the beauty
Yeah.
is Zomato does have a brand called Hyperpure, which
Okay.
supplies all this to all the restaurants. Like they supply a lot, not this, they supply hundreds other things
Yeah.
to restaurants. So this will actually help them.
They should just
them
make it
also,
available. Yeah.
and they can easily just integrate this very easily into the app.
But I can do a test on this just to show people the difference between what you're getting in a plastic versus
we can
whatever.
we can definitely figure out and see if,
love
if there's something significant we should
Exactly.
show it. And
If it's
not, then
something minimal, we don't want to make a big noise about it. But if
Correct.
there's something significant, I believe people they have
but
the
I
right
think
to know
more than
about this.
anything, but having this option,
Yeah, it's just
you'll
so
be
easy.
very surprised to see how many people actually go for that option.
Absolutely. We know
I
so
would
many
go for
people.
100%.
I would go
Like
for
a
it
couple
too.
of like 10-20 bucks more, and hey, it comes in a more biodegradable, not plastic.
Absolutely.
And yes, it won't last for whatever time, but hey, it'll be safer for you. So
Absolutely. So
because here's the thing, today more and more people are ordering in.
Yeah.
Right? Now since they're ordering in, it's not just once in a month I'm getting one plastic cutter.
Yeah.
Which no matter how much it leaches is not going to affect me because it'll be micrograms, right? But if I'm ordering 3 times a week, 4 times a week, the cumulative effect of it may be a lot more. So even when we do a test, it may not be like, oh my God, it's such a big difference.
Yeah.
But even if it's this much 5 times a week, 10 times a week. Now suddenly
That's
it's
the
going to
point,
start.
Right? I mean,
Absolutely.
there's crap everywhere in the air too. We can't go around chasing that and creating fear amongst people. But I'm saying,
Correct.
imagine a patient. Okay, take an ER positive patient, endometriosis, a prostate patient, someone who has a pro-inflammatory disease. This small thing can impact him differently.
Absolutely.
The idea is give people options, and so I'm going to reach out because I want to test a lot of samples and actually look and see really, how people can get better.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for your time. I know how busy you are, yet you chose to be here today. I really, really appreciate it.
Absolute pleasure.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Stay tuned for more. We're going to continue our journey, learning, sharing, and evolving.